My name is Maya, and welcome to my channel, Cranley Place, where I'm posting content on scarf style, knot tutorials, and more. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to be notified of new videos, which I'm publishing weekly. Some of you have asked about scarf storage, so today I'll talk about some of the ways I've organized my collection in the past, as well as how I currently store things now. As with anything, most likely you start small. I received my first Hermès scarf as a gift years ago, and because it was just the one, I used to store it in its box. This is the actual box with its original sleeve. So the advantage here is that it has acid-free paper and it's decorative. And since I only had the one, I knew what color and design it was, obviously. But fast forward when you start to acquire more. I continued to use the box storage method for a while, but of course, after you have more than one, labeling becomes more important to avoid having to guess and open each one to find what you want to wear. So back in the day, I used to label with Post-its on the side of the boxes, mainly to avoid sticker residue. However, aesthetically, that wasn't the best look, so I ended up using labels like this. I'll put a link in the description. I like these because they're low residue and will come away cleanly if you need to remove them. And they're easily customized with either a laser or inkjet printer. And if you like organizing, they're also handy for other things too, not just your scarves. As far as how you label, you'll figure out what works best for you. But in my case, I would put the name of the scarf, the artist's name, and say up to 3 dominant colors. So in this case, the scarf is called Sangle by Joachim Metz, and you'll see that there's predominantly blues, there's some greens and reds. You can of course see other colors as well, but that's how I chose to label it because it was enough to jog my memory. I've also seen cases where people attach photo thumbnails of the scarf for reference. But frankly, the labels worked just fine for me, but again, you'll figure out what's best for you. When my collection grew to more than 6 or 8 scarves, I started dedicating dresser drawer space, basically arranging them in a folded fashion like the displays you see in an Hermès store. I was lucky enough to have a shallow drawer in which to do this, but if you're sharing drawer space with other items or clothes, if that's the case, I really like these stackable fabric drawer organizers, and I'll also put a link to these in the description. These are great because they're stackable. You can organize your scarves in a nicely folded way, and the bins are obviously useful for other clothes that may share your scarf space. Most of my scarves are 90 by 90. So this type of bin works well for those, as well as many of the other size formats, ranging from the 45 by 45 pocket square size to the 70 by 70, maxi twilly, the giant triangles, and the 140s. But what about other formats, like the plissés or the twillies, both of which come in circular boxes? For me, I only have a handful of plissés, and these are basically 90 by 90 scarves that have been tightly pleated to create this shape. The pleats can loosen over time, so I've always stored them in their original boxes. I keep them unlidded so I can see which scarf it is and stack them in a drawer. If you have more than a handful, this method may not work for you, but you can find divided fabric clothes organizers like the ones I recommended for the 90s that would work similarly if you need to store a bunch of these. One thing I will add, why fabric versus plastic organizers? Certainly, I've seen other people use plastic bins or drawers to organize their scarves, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just prefer the fabric to let the silk breathe. These are natural fibers, so storing in plastic isn't necessarily ideal. But regardless of what you choose, keeping your scarves in a cool, dry, and dark environment is definitely recommended. Let me talk about twillies. I know some of you out there may have dozens or even hundreds of these things. And again, when your collection is on the smaller side, you may choose to keep them in their original boxes. They can be unlidded and stacked in your drawer, Or you may use the box labeling method, but again, if you have a lot, it can get a little annoying to find what you want quickly. So similar to the plissé scarves I talked about before, I do like storing these in a rolled format in a divided fabric organizer like this. I put a link in the description as well. And these are meant for socks or undies, but actually they're perfectly sized for twillies as well. And like the other organizers, they're stackable too if you happen to be using a deeper drawer and sharing space with other clothes and items. So how I store my scarves today is a combination of a lot of what I spoke about earlier. When we redid our closets a while ago, I actually had several shallow drawers installed that I intended specifically for scarves. If you're using a closet organizer system, these are about 4 or 5 inches deep, meant for lingerie or accessories and the like. So again, I do store them folded and arranged by predominant color. It's my own version of a store display. Like I said before, my collection is mostly 90s, so I do mix whatever 45s, 70s, maxi, twilly, etc. in there by color as well, since I don't have enough of those to bother sorting them by scarf type. My 140s are stored similarly, but obviously they take up a bit more space lengthwise, so they're in a different shallow drawer. And the plissés are kept unlidded in their original boxes to retain their shape and stacked in a deeper drawer, while the twillies are in a divided fabric organizer like the one I showed earlier. What about hanging your scarves? There is no doubt that each Hermès scarf is a work of art, and in fact, many people do hang them as decor. Or you might like to see them hanging in your closet. Certainly, there's nothing wrong with that. If you have the linear space, you can hang them individually, or if you need to consolidate, you can also find those multi-tiered hangers that would work well. I've seen some people knot them loosely tied to bars inside their closets or hang them folded on display bars like you sometimes see in the stores. Personally, the only time I hang a scarf is when I'm airing it out. I like to let the silk relax from being knotted and tied, and then when it's aired out, I fold it and it goes back in the drawer. I do know that Hermès also recommends storing the scarves flat and unknotted, but again, this is a personal preference. You may like to see all your beauties hanging in your closet or on the wall, and that's fine, whatever works for you. The last thing I'll add about hanging scarves, though, especially if they're exposed to sunlight and kept in the same position for a while, is that there is a risk of impacting your scarf colors. You've probably seen this in other parts of your house, maybe a couch or a fabric table runner with one side that's consistently exposed to sunlight through a window. And after a while, the fabric bleaches and is usually lighter where it's been hit by those rays. So just a word of warning if you decide to hang them decoratively outside of your closet. For me, folding and storing in drawers is my way to go. The last thing I'd like to talk about is moth control, and this applies not only to silk, but cashmere and wool. So cleanliness is the top tip because these insects prefer soiled garments. They can also be attracted to perfume, so it's even more important to air out and keep your silk and cashmere items clean. In the drawers where I store my scarves, I use lavender sachets like this one. Rosemary also works if you don't like the smell of lavender. Alternatively, you can use mothballs, which I don't personally like the smell of, or cedar blocks. But my main caution with these latter methods is to make sure that they're not in direct contact with any of the fabric to avoid possible residue or staining. But whatever method you choose, these should be refreshed quarterly to keep the pests away from your beautiful scarves. So there you have it, my top tips on storing your silk and cashmere Hermès scarves. I hope this has been helpful. Please like, share, and comment if you enjoyed this video. In future episodes, I'll share other scarf knot tutorials, reviews, and more, so be sure to hit that subscribe button to be notified of new videos. Thanks again for joining me today. Until next time.